He helped her daughter. What the Apache mother said next shocked the rancher. The sun was slowly descending behind the rolling hills of the ranch, casting long, golden shadows across the wide fields. The gentle wind rustled the tall grass, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers and horses. The rancher wiped the sweat from his forehead and adjusted his hat as he checked the fences along the edge of his property. Life on the ranch was never easy, but it was peaceful in its own way, a quiet rhythm of work, animals, and nature. He had spent decades here, learning the land and understanding the moods of the weather, the soil, and the animals. It was a life of discipline and routine, but also of quiet satisfaction. On this particular afternoon, the rancher noticed something unusual from the corner of his eye. Near the edge of the property, not far from the creek, a small figure was moving clumsily among the rocks and shrubs. As he squinted against the sun, he realized it was a young girl, no older than 7 or 8. She seemed to be struggling with something. Her tiny hands were grasping at a small bundle, and she tripped over a rock, losing her balance and almost falling into the shallow stream. Without thinking, the rancher grabbed a nearby rope and ran toward her. "Hey! Be careful," he called out in a firm but gentle voice. His boots crunched against the dry grass as he closed the distance quickly. The girl froze for a moment, her wide eyes looking at him in surprise. She was clearly frightened, but there was no time to hesitate. By the time he reached her, she had stumbled again, and the small bundle she carried had tumbled to the ground. The rancher bent down carefully, keeping his movements slow so as not to scare her. "It's okay, I'm here to help," he said. He reached out his hand, and after a moment of hesitation, the girl allowed him to lift her safely away from the rocks. She clung to him for a second, her tiny hands holding onto his shirt. The rancher set her down gently on the grass and examined her feet. They were scraped and dusty, and one ankle looked a little swollen. He realized she might have twisted it while running across the rocky terrain. "You're going to be all right," he said reassuringly. "Just a little scrape. Nothing we can't handle." The girl looked up at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of relief and curiosity. She didn't speak, but she didn't pull away either. The rancher smiled, trying to ease the tension. "Do you live around here? Are you lost?" he asked, glancing toward the tree line where a small cabin was partially hidden behind the shadows. From a distance, a woman appeared. She was moving quickly, her steps careful but hurried. She was tall and strong-looking, with dark hair tied back and sharp, alert eyes. The rancher recognized her as the girl's mother. He had seen her around before, but they had never spoken. The woman's expression was guarded, almost wary. She slowed as she approached, her gaze fixed on the rancher, measuring him carefully. "Thank you," she said quietly, though there was something in her tone that suggested caution rather than gratitude. "Are you hurt?" she asked the girl, her hands resting protectively on her daughter's shoulders. "No, she's fine, just a small scrape," he replied. "I wanted to make sure she didn't get hurt worse." The mother studied him for a moment. Her eyes were thoughtful, and there was a sense of wariness in the way she held herself. He noticed that she carried herself with pride, but also with the weight of responsibility. Her daughter was clearly very important to her, and she seemed determined to protect her from any danger. The rancher nodded respectfully. "I understand," he said. "I'm just glad I could help." The girl looked up at her mother, then back at the rancher. She gave a small smile, a mixture of relief and shyness, before tugging at her mother's hand. The mother nodded slightly at the rancher, a small acknowledgement that she had seen his kindness, though her eyes still held a hint of caution. "Let's get you cleaned up," the mother said, leading her daughter toward the cabin. She glanced back at the rancher. "You didn't have to chase after her," she said, her voice calm but firm. The rancher smiled gently. "I couldn't just let her get hurt. She's lucky she didn't fall into the creek. That water is cold, and the rocks are sharp." He paused for a moment, thinking about what to say next. "I'm just glad she's okay." The mother nodded, a faint smile crossing her face, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. There was something in her expression that suggested both surprise and a hint of suspicion. Perhaps she wasn't used to strangers showing concern without expecting something in return. The rancher understood. He didn't take offense. He had learned long ago that people's trust had to be earned, and that actions often spoke louder than words. The girl's small hand reached out and brushed against the rancher's arm as they passed by. It was a fleeting gesture, but it carried a sense of connection, a quiet acknowledgement of gratitude. The rancher felt a warmth in his chest, realizing that sometimes the smallest acts could make the biggest difference. As he watched the mother and daughter disappear toward the cabin, he couldn't help but feel a sense of curiosity. Who were they, really? What challenges had they faced to make them so cautious yet strong? He decided he would respect their space, but he also knew that if they ever needed help again, he would be there. It was simply the right thing to do. The rest of the afternoon passed quietly. The rancher returned to his work, repairing a section of fence and checking on the horses. Yet, in the back of his mind, he kept thinking about the girl and her mother. There was something remarkable about them, their strength, their caution, and the subtle trust that had been shown in such a brief encounter. He realized that sometimes life presented moments that felt small on the surface but carried profound meaning underneath. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, he paused for a moment to look toward the cabin one last time. The wind carried the faint sound of laughter, soft and musical, from the girl as she played near the doorway. The mother stood nearby, watching her carefully, her expression softening in the evening light. The rancher smiled quietly to himself. Moments like these reminded him of why he loved this life. The simple acts of kindness, the unspoken bonds formed through small gestures, and the beauty of human connection in unexpected places. That evening, as the rancher sat on the porch with a cup of tea, he reflected on the day's events. He thought about the girl's small smile, the mother's cautious yet respectful glance, and the way a simple act of helping someone had created a ripple of connection. He knew that this encounter was only the beginning. Life had a way of bringing people together in surprising ways, and he felt a quiet anticipation for what might come next. The rancher also understood something else. That trust, once given, was precious. He had seen the beginnings of trust in the mother's eyes, subtle but real, and he knew it was something to be cherished and respected. He made a silent promise to himself that if they ever needed him again, he would be there, ready to help, without hesitation. Night fell over the ranch, bringing with it a calm stillness. The stars began to twinkle in the clear sky, and the distant mountains were silhouetted against the darkness. The rancher finished his tea, stood up, and took one last look around the property. Life was unpredictable, and moments like today reminded him of the importance of kindness and courage, even in small actions. As he went inside to rest, he couldn't shake the feeling that something meaningful had just begun. The young girl, the mother, and the brief encounter by the creek had stirred something in him, an awareness of how fragile yet strong human connections could be. He knew that their paths would cross again, and when they did, he wanted to be ready to offer help and support in any way he could. Little did he know, that simple act of helping the girl would set off a chain of events that would test courage, build trust, and create bonds that neither he nor the mother had expected. It was the beginning of a story that would touch hearts, teach lessons about humanity, and remind everyone involved that even in a world full of challenges, kindness could be a powerful force. And so, the rancher closed the door, feeling a quiet satisfaction. The sun had set, but the warmth of the afternoon lingered in his heart. It was a small moment in the vast landscape of life, yet it carried the seeds of something much larger, a story of trust, courage, and connection that was only just beginning. The next morning, the rancher woke up early, as he always did, before the sun had fully risen. The cool air of dawn filled the ranch, and the sound of the horses quietly moving in their stalls reminded him of the rhythm of life he had always known. Yet, despite the familiar start to his day, his thoughts kept returning to the girl and her mother. He couldn't stop thinking about the small gesture of trust the mother had shown, subtle though it was. There was something about her words, her cautious glance, and the way she held her daughter that left him both curious and respectful. After feeding the horses and checking the fences, he decided to take a short walk along the path that led toward the creek where the girl had stumbled the day before. He didn't have a particular reason, except that he wanted to make sure the area was safe, and perhaps in a quiet way to see if the family was doing all right. The sun was rising slowly, turning the sky into a soft canvas of oranges and pinks. Birds chirped from the trees, and the gentle rustle of leaves created a calm, peaceful sound. As he approached the creek, he noticed movement near the cabin. The girl was there, playing quietly with a small wooden toy she had carved herself. She seemed focused and happy, completely unaware of the rancher's presence at first. The mother was nearby, sweeping the porch and keeping a watchful eye on her daughter. She looked up and noticed him, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if measuring whether his intentions were true. The rancher lifted his hand in a small wave and walked slowly toward them. "Good morning," he said in a calm voice. "I just wanted to make sure everything is all right." The mother's expression softened a little, though she remained cautious. "Good morning," she replied, her tone polite but measured. "Everything is fine here." "Thank you for worrying about her yesterday." There was a pause, as if she was considering whether to say more. Then, unexpectedly, she added, You see her as a child, but do you see her strength? The rancher stopped in his tracks, surprised by the words. Her strength? He repeated, curious. I didn't mean anything else. I just wanted to help. The mother's eyes met his, steady and clear. Yes, you helped, she said softly. But she is more than someone who needs help. She is strong, brave, and wise in ways many adults are not. You helped her because she is small, but do you notice how she learns, how she thinks, how she cares? The rancher felt a sudden wave of respect and admiration for the woman. He realized that her words were not just about the girl, they were about life itself, about seeing beyond appearances and recognizing the quiet strength in others. I see it now, he said honestly. She is brave, and I can tell she has a sharp mind. I just want to make sure she stays safe. The mother nodded, a small smile crossing her face. It was the first time he saw a hint of warmth in her expression, something genuine and unguarded. You are kind, she said. Not many people understand that strength can exist even in small hands. The girl, who had been playing quietly, looked up at the rancher. Her small eyes were bright and curious, filled with a mix of admiration and shyness. She walked slowly toward him, her steps careful. The rancher knelt down to her level and smiled. Good morning, he said. How are you today? I'm okay, she said softly. Then, after a pause, she added, Thank you for helping me. I'm glad you're all right. He looked up at her mother, who was watching the exchange closely. I didn't do much, he added modestly. You did enough, the mother said firmly. Sometimes helping is not about the big gestures. It is about showing care, being present, and acting with honesty. That is what matters. The rancher felt a warmth in his chest at her words. He realized that this woman carried wisdom far beyond her years, and that her daughter was fortunate to have her guidance. He decided that he would respect their boundaries, but also be ready to help if ever needed. He wanted to earn their trust, not just offer help and expect gratitude. Over the next few days, the rancher found himself paying more attention to the small details of life around the cabin. He noticed how the mother worked tirelessly to care for her daughter, how she balanced chores, cooking, and teaching her child lessons about the world. It was clear that she had endured many challenges, yet she remained strong, disciplined, and compassionate. One afternoon, as he was checking the fences near the creek, he saw the mother struggling with a heavy bucket of water. Without hesitation, he rushed over. Here, let me help, he said, lifting one of the buckets with ease. The mother looked at him with surprise, then hesitated. You don't have to, she said, but there was no anger in her voice, only curiosity. I want to, he replied simply. It's no trouble at all. For a moment she studied him as if deciding whether to trust him further. Then she nodded slowly. Thank you, she said, her tone softer this time. It was a small acknowledgement, but the rancher felt it as deeply meaningful. The girl ran ahead to fetch more firewood, and the rancher followed at a comfortable distance, allowing her space while keeping an eye on her. He noticed how carefully she balanced the sticks, how she paused to examine a bird or a flower, and how she carried herself with quiet confidence. The mother's words about strength resonated in his mind. Indeed, there was strength in her small body, in her actions, and in her calm determination. That evening, the mother invited him to sit on the porch with them. He hesitated for a moment, unsure if it was appropriate, but she gestured politely. We appreciate your presence, she said. Not many people take the time to understand before acting. They sat together quietly, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The girl played nearby, laughing softly as she chased a butterfly. The rancher felt a sense of peace in this simple moment, yet he also sensed the depth of unspoken stories in the mother's eyes. She was someone who had faced hardship and still carried herself with dignity and grace. You know, the mother said after a while, breaking the silence, helping someone is not always about fixing a problem. Sometimes it is about understanding them, seeing them as they are, and being patient. The rancher nodded, feeling the truth in her words. I understand, he said, and I want to do just that. I want to respect both of you, and if I can ever help in a way that matters, I will. The mother's eyes softened, and for the first time there was a full smile on her face. You are sincere, she said. Many people help only for recognition or reward.
Do it because it is right, that is rare.
The rancher felt a mixture of pride and humility. He had never sought recognition. He simply wanted to do what was right. Yet, to hear it acknowledged by someone as perceptive and strong as her meant more than he could express. Over the next several days, the rancher's quiet acts of kindness continued. He would fix a broken fence post, bring fresh vegetables, or help carry firewood when needed. Each time, the mother watched him, sometimes with a hint of surprise, sometimes with a small nod of acknowledgement. The girl grew increasingly comfortable around him, often running up to ask questions about the animals or showing him something she had learned. One day, the mother spoke words that surprised him again. "You are not just helping my daughter," she said quietly. "You are helping me too. You remind me that there are still good people in this world, people who act with care and respect without expecting anything in return." The rancher felt a lump in his throat. He had never thought of it that way. I'm glad," he said softly. "I never meant to do anything more than help." "You are doing more than you know," she replied. "Sometimes the presence of someone kind can change everything." The young girl, overhearing this, ran up and hugged the rancher's leg. "Thank you for helping me," she whispered. Her eyes were full of innocence and trust, and the rancher gently patted her head. He looked up at the mother, who was watching with a mix of pride and admiration. He realized then that the bond they were forming was built on trust, respect, and the understanding that help could be more than physical. It could be emotional, moral, and even spiritual. Days turned into weeks, and the rancher continued his quiet support. He never imposed, always waited for permission and acted with patience and sincerity. The mother's initial wariness faded slowly, replaced by a cautious trust. She began to allow small interactions, like inviting him to share a meal or teaching him about the plants and traditions of her culture. It was in these small moments that the rancher realized the depth of their connection. He was not just helping a child, he was becoming a part of a life, learning lessons about resilience, strength, and the quiet power of kindness. And so, the rancher understood something profound, that helping someone could be an ongoing act of respect, patience, and care. It was not a single gesture, but a series of actions that built trust, nurtured strength, and created bonds that could last a lifetime. Little did he know, the true test of this trust and kindness was yet to come, and the next challenge would reveal the depth of their courage, compassion, and humanity. The rancher's routine continued as usual, tending to his land and animals, but his mind often wandered to the small cabin near the creek where the Apache mother and her daughter lived. Over the past few weeks, he had built a quiet bond with them, a connection that was rooted in respect, patience, and shared moments. Each day, he had seen the girl grow more confident, more playful, and more curious about the world around her. Her laughter often reached his ears as he worked on the fences, a reminder of the simple joys that life could offer. One morning, as he was feeding the horses, he noticed smoke rising gently from the cabin chimney. It was a clear sign that the mother had already started her day. As he walked along the path toward the creek, he saw her struggling to carry a heavy sack of grain. Without a second thought, he approached her. "Let me help you with that," he said warmly. The mother glanced at him, her eyes showing a mixture of surprise and hesitation. "You don't need to," she said, but there was no sharpness in her tone, only a quiet acknowledgement of the offer. "I want to," the rancher replied simply. "It's no trouble." For a moment, she studied him, as if weighing whether to accept. Then she nodded slowly, a small smile forming on her lips. Together, they lifted the heavy sack and brought it inside the cabin. The girl ran ahead, eager to help, carrying smaller items in her tiny hands, her face glowing with excitement. The rancher watched them work, feeling a sense of warmth in his chest. He realized that helping wasn't just about lifting heavy objects or tending to injuries. It was about being present, sharing moments, and showing care without expecting anything in return. The mother had already taught him a valuable lesson. Kindness could be quiet, consistent, and meaningful in ways that words alone could never express. Over the next few days, the rancher found more opportunities to assist. He would fix broken fence posts, repair leaky water buckets, or gather firewood for the mother and daughter. Each time he made sure to act respectfully, never imposing, always waiting for their permission. Gradually, the mother began to trust him more. She invited him to sit with them while they had a simple meal of bread, beans, and fresh vegetables from their garden. They would talk quietly, sharing stories about the land, the animals, and small lessons about life. The young girl, full of curiosity, began asking questions about the rancher's work. "How do you know which fence needs fixing first?" she asked one day as they walked along the boundary of the ranch. "Well," the rancher replied, smiling, "you have to pay attention. Look at the posts, see which ones are leaning or broken. You have to use your eyes and your hands together. And always think about the animals. They depend on these fences to keep them safe." The girl listened intently, her eyes wide with interest. She tried mimicking his movements, pretending to hammer imaginary nails into the ground. The rancher chuckled softly, watching her determination. "You're a fast learner," he said. "You have the patience for it, too, which is very important." Her mother, watching from the porch, said quietly, "You see, she is strong, but she also has curiosity and wisdom. That is her greatest strength." The rancher nodded, understanding the depth of her words. The girl was not just small and innocent. She had intelligence, courage, and a gentle confidence that would carry her far in life. He realized that helping her was not just about physical support. It was about encouraging her growth, guiding her gently, and respecting her individuality. One afternoon, the rancher noticed that the girl was trying to reach a high branch to pick some wild berries. She struggled, jumping and stretching as high as she could, but the branch was just out of reach. Without hesitation, he walked over and offered his hand. "Here, I can help," he said. Gently, he lifted her so she could reach the berries, letting her pick the ripest ones herself. "Thank you," she exclaimed, her eyes shining with excitement. "You did the hard part," he said with a smile. "I just helped you reach it." Her mother watched quietly, a small, proud smile forming on her face. She spoke softly to the rancher. "You are teaching her more than just how to reach a branch. You are teaching her to trust, to be brave, and to accept help when it is offered with care. That is something few adults ever learn." The rancher felt humbled by her words. He realized that the small acts of helping, guiding, and supporting the girl were building a bridge of trust between them. It was not just about her safety, it was about her growth and confidence. As the days passed, the rancher also began to understand the mother better. She was a woman of quiet strength, carrying responsibilities that most people could not imagine. She taught her daughter about the world with patience and wisdom, balancing discipline with love. The rancher admired her deeply, not just for her resilience, but for the way she nurtured her daughter's spirit. He began to see their lives as interconnected threads, each action influencing the other, each moment carrying meaning. One evening, as the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold, the mother spoke to him quietly. "You are not just helping my daughter," she said, her voice calm but sincere. "You are helping me too. You remind me that there are still good people in this world, people who act with care and respect without expecting anything in return." The rancher was taken aback. He had never thought of his actions in that way. I just wanted to help," he said softly. "You are doing more than you know," she replied. "Sometimes the presence of someone kind changes everything." Even small acts can make a difference in ways we cannot immediately see. The young girl ran up, holding a small wooden toy she had carved. "Look, I made this for you," she exclaimed. She handed it to the rancher, who accepted it with both hands, touched by the gesture. "Thank you," he said, smiling warmly. "This is very special." The mother watched quietly, her eyes glistening with a mixture of pride and gratitude. The rancher realized that the bond they were forming was not just about helping or receiving thanks. It was about trust, respect, and understanding. It was about showing care without expectation, and allowing that care to create a sense of safety and confidence. Over the next week, the rancher noticed that small challenges began to arise around the cabin. A section of the roof needed repair, some of the garden tools had broken, and the water supply occasionally ran low. Without hesitation, he began addressing these problems quietly, always with permission and respect. He fixed the roof, sharpened the tools, and even helped dig a small trench to improve water flow. Each time the mother watched, sometimes with a small nod, sometimes with a quiet word of thanks. One day, as they worked together, she spoke words that surprised him again. "You are patient," she said softly. "Most people would hurry, complain, or act without care. But you understand that trust and help are built slowly, with thoughtfulness and respect. That is rare." The rancher felt a warmth in his chest. He realized that helping someone was not just about physical acts. It was about understanding, empathy, and consistent care. He had come to respect her deeply, and he could see why the girl looked up to him with trust and admiration. The young girl continued to grow more confident each day. She would sometimes run ahead to check on the animals, or carry small items for her mother, or practice simple chores under the rancher's watchful eye. Each small achievement brought joy to the rancher, who began to feel a deep sense of connection to both mother and daughter. It was in these quiet, everyday moments that the rancher began to understand the true value of his actions. Helping was not about recognition or reward. It was about building a relationship, nurturing trust, and creating a safe space where courage, curiosity, and kindness could flourish. One evening, the mother approached him quietly as he was finishing his chores. "I have seen how you care," she said softly. "You don't just act for what is easy or convenient. You act because it is right. That is rare, and it matters more than you know." The rancher felt a lump in his throat. I never thought of it that way, he said. You should, she replied. Sometimes the world can be harsh, and people forget the value of kindness. But your actions remind me, and my daughter, that goodness still exists. That is a gift. The rancher nodded quietly, deeply moved. He realized that his small, consistent efforts had created ripples far beyond what he had imagined. The mother's words reminded him that the simplest gestures, when done with care, could have a profound impact on someone's life. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the cabin and the surrounding hills, the rancher watched the girl play with a small wooden toy. He could see her mother nearby, her face calm and proud, and he felt a quiet satisfaction. He knew that the trust he had earned, the bonds he had begun to build, and the lives he had touched were more meaningful than any reward he could imagine. And yet, he sensed that their story was far from over. Challenges would come, testing courage, patience, and trust. But he was ready, prepared to continue helping, guiding, and protecting them, not out of obligation, but because it was the right thing to do. The weeks passed quietly on the ranch, but something had changed in the rancher's heart. Helping the Apache mother and her daughter was no longer just an occasional act of kindness. It had become a natural part of his daily life. He didn't think about it much anymore. If they needed help, he helped. If they didn't, he simply respected their space. The bond between them had grown slowly, built not on big promises, but on small, consistent actions. The young girl was becoming more confident every day. She moved around the land with ease now, no longer afraid of the creek or the rocky paths. Sometimes she would visit the ranch to watch the horses. The rancher would explain how animals communicated, how they showed trust, and how patience was always the key to building a connection. She listened carefully, absorbing every word. Her mother, meanwhile, had become less guarded. The cautious distance she once kept had softened into quiet respect. She still carried herself with strength and dignity, but now there was warmth in her eyes when she spoke to the rancher. She trusted him, not completely at first, but enough to let him be part of their world. Then one afternoon, something happened that tested that trust. The sky had turned gray earlier than usual. Dark clouds gathered over the hills, and the wind picked up speed. The rancher had seen many storms in his life, but this one felt different. The air was heavier, the silence deeper. He quickly secured the animals, checked the fences, and made sure everything on the ranch was prepared. As he finished, a thought suddenly struck him. The cabin near the creek. That area sometimes flooded when storms were strong. The water didn't always rise quickly, but when it did, it could surprise people. Without hesitation, he grabbed his jacket and headed toward the cabin. The wind was stronger now, pushing dust across the ground. Leaves flew past him as he walked quickly. When he reached the cabin, he saw the mother outside, gathering items from the yard. The girl was near the doorway, holding a small bag. I have no idea that this is cool and uncertain of my past, the coming from foreseen. The creek might rise. The mother paused. She looked toward the creek, then back at him. Her expression was thoughtful, not panicked. I was thinking the same, she said. But I didn't want to trouble you. It's no trouble, he replied. Safety comes first. They worked together quickly but calmly. The rancher carried heavier items while the mother gathered essentials. The girl stayed close, surprisingly composed for her age. She had learned well from her mother. Stay calm, listen, and act carefully. Soon they began walking toward the ranch house, which sat on slightly higher land. The wind howled around them, but they moved steadily. The rancher kept a careful eye on both of them, making sure they were comfortable and safe. When they finally reached the ranch house, rain had started falling. It wasn't heavy yet, but it was steady. The rancher opened the door and invited them inside. Make yourselves comfortable, he said. You can stay here until the storm passes. The girl looked around with curiosity. She had visited before, but never during the storm. The mother nodded gratefully. Thank you, she said softly. You didn't have to do this, but you did. They settled inside. The rancher made warm tea while the rain intensified outside. Thunder rumbled in the distance, not frightening, just powerful. The girl sat by the window watching the rain, fascinated rather than scared. Hours passed slowly. The storm grew stronger, then gradually began to weaken. Throughout it all, the rancher stayed calm, checking occasionally on the animals and making sure everything inside remained comfortable. The mother observed him quietly. Finally, when the rain softened and the wind slowed, she spoke. You didn't hesitate, she said. You came immediately when you thought we might need help. The rancher shrugged gently. That's what neighbors do. We look out for each other. Not always. Some people wait. Some people think only of themselves. But you act with care without expecting anything back. That is rare. Her voice carried sincerity, not exaggeration. The rancher felt humbled. I just did what felt right, he replied. The girl suddenly walked over and hugged him lightly. It was spontaneous, natural. He smiled, gently patting her shoulder. The mother watched that moment carefully. Then she said something that truly surprised him. You didn't just help my daughter, she said slowly. You helped me trust again. After many difficult experiences, I became cautious. I taught my daughter to be strong, but I also taught her to be careful with people. You showed us that kindness still exists. The rancher didn't know what to say at first. Those words carried weight. I'm honored you feel that way, he finally said. Trust is important. I would never take it lightly. She nodded. And because of you, she continued, my daughter sees the world differently. She sees that help can come without conditions. That respect can exist between people who are different. That is a powerful lesson. Silence followed, but it was comfortable silence. Outside, the storm was almost gone. A soft golden light began breaking through the clouds. The air smelled fresh, clean, renewed. The girl ran to the door excitedly. Look! The sun is coming back. They stepped outside together. The land looked calm again. The creek had risen slightly, but not dangerously. Everything was safe. Relief spread across all three of them. The rancher checked the surroundings one more time, then turned back to them. You can stay longer if you want, he offered. No rush. I think we'll head back soon. But today meant a lot. As they walked slowly back toward the cabin later, the atmosphere felt different. Not heavy, not uncertain, just peaceful. The trust between them had deepened in a way words alone could never achieve. At the cabin, the girl waved enthusiastically before going inside. The mother lingered for a moment. I used to believe strength meant facing everything alone, she said quietly. Now I understand that true strength also means accepting kindness, building connections, and allowing trust to grow. You helped me realize that. The rancher nodded thoughtfully. And you helped me too, he said. You reminded me that helping isn't just about action. It's about respect, patience, and understanding. They shared a quiet smile, one of mutual respect. From that day forward, their relationship felt natural. No awkwardness, no hesitation, just simple human connection. The rancher continued his work, the mother continued raising her daughter with wisdom and care, and the girl kept growing stronger, more confident, and full of curiosity. Sometimes they shared meals. Sometimes they simply exchanged waves from a distance, but the bond remained steady. The rancher often reflected on how a small moment helping a child near the creek had led to something much deeper. It had built trust, friendship, and mutual respect. It reminded him that kindness rarely ends with one act. It creates ripples that spread quietly through people's lives. And the mother never forgot either. Whenever she spoke about that storm, she would say something simple but meaningful. Kindness is powerful. It may begin small, but it can change how people see the world. The rancher agreed completely. Life returned to its peaceful rhythm, but something lasting remained. A connection built not by words alone, but by consistent care, respect, and understanding. And in that quiet corner of the land, near the creek and the wide open fields, 3 lives continued forward with a little more trust, a little more hope, and a deeper appreciation for the simple power of kindness.